Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to our live stream of our Shakedown, our first ever run in the VRC Formula North America 2018. Stand by here while I wait for talkback on my end of the stream just to make sure that things are actually happening. We'll wait for that. And I'm showing a good talkback here. And we have got good audio. I'm loud and clear on my end. So, I see that there are currently 4 of you in the room. We'll wait another couple of minutes there. Boba Vet, first of all, welcome. And second of all, yours won't unpack from zip. Which program are you running to unpack this? And have you downloaded the complete pack as a single unit, or have you downloaded the one car individually? Again, we are here. Welcome. Just waiting for the room to fill up. Some stragglers here, some latecomers to the party. If they want to join us, they may do so now. Again, this is VRC Formula North America 2018. This is the Dallara DW12 chassis with the IndyCar IR18 Aero kit on it, the homologated single-spec Aero kit for the 2018 IndyCar season. We are at Laguna Seca here today. And this is the road course version of the IR18. This is the livery that many of you may recognize as being run in the IndyCar series this year by Sébastien Bourdais, with a couple of exceptions, most notably last weekend in Portland, where he had a big crash in practice and they had to cobble the car together with spare parts. But of course, we do have fictional sponsors on these VRC liveries, but the color scheme looks pretty close to what this car really looks like as Bourdais has been running it this year, so certainly that is great to see. VRC, of course, we should not be surprised. They always do absolutely fantastic work on every single product that they have put out to us. So first of all, before we get on with anything, a big shout out and a big thank you, of course, is in order to those VRC guys. Absolutely tremendous work by them, as always. See that there are currently 8 of you now in the live chat room. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Well, of course, those of you who might not know, this is currently the car that is running in the Verizon IndyCar series here in 2018. This is the latest spec. IndyCar introducing this spec of the DW12 chassis. They're calling it the IR18 now in terms of the Aero kit that we're running. This car from VRC, it completes the Formula North America pack. It's the 3rd car in the series. A few months ago, we received Formula North America 1999, based off of a 1999 Reynard chassis running in the old Champ Car kart days. We also have the DW12 in the 2012 specification, as IndyCar ran from 2012 to 2017, and now we have this, the 2018 car, Formula North America 2018. It is the IR18 Dallara. Boba Fett, I'm seeing that you are running WinRAR, and you had no problem with the previous pack. It wouldn't recognize your email for individual downloads. I did not have such a problem when I downloaded this. I downloaded just the single car. I did not re-download the entire pack with both of the previous release cars as well as South Star Speedway. I did not get my email recognized for this individual car either. I did throw another $4.50 in VRC's general direction. Honestly, I would be more than happy to throw them $450 for the quality that they've been putting out to us. If worse comes to worse, you may have to donate to them again specifically for this car. That's how I got mine. I unpacked it with WinRAR just right into the Assetto Corsa content directory, and there were no problems. I've not driven it yet, but it is going to be a tremendous experience, I am sure. Just first of all, just taking a look at the exterior details on this car, yeah, it is tremendous, as we can see. I have seen this car in reality. I've stood pretty much this close to it, as a matter of fact, and I have to say the detail is absolutely spot on, right down to this little strake that you can see running down the nose section. Believe it or not, that is a little air dam. That's in place just to control any uplift that might come across the front end of the chassis should the car get sideways, particularly on ovals. It does do a great deal of work in keeping these cars on the ground if they get sideways at high speed. It does work quite well. Of course, in the case of Robert Wickens, he rode up on Ryan Hunter-Reay, so that becomes negated. But for the most part, nice little detail on VRC's part, and of course, great work by IndyCar on refining those aerodynamics a bit. Let's take a look at the setup screen. Take a look at what's going on here. I've not driven the car yet. I've just literally driven it in a straight line to make sure that I had sounds and did a sound check for the live stream, but I've not driven it beyond that. Let's see, gear display, 6-speed box. Looks like we have 6 forward gears and presumably 1 reverse. Final drive ratio there as well. These appear to be adjustable to your heart's content. Complete default values here. No work done yet on this car by yours truly. Tire screen, we should have 2 compounds here, primes and alternates, and there they are. Of course, they are Firestone in reality. VRC going the safe way and branding them as Fire Bridge. Pressures, default values, 18 psi in the front, 17 on the rear. Adjustment range appears to be 16 to 20. And that should be reiterated on the rear as well. And indeed it is. Fuel, zeroed out to keep the car quiet. Fuel capacity here, 70 liters. Aero front wing, rear wing main plane, rear wing flap. If we adjust these, do we see any visual angle of attack? Yes, look at that. And there's even a third element that comes across the top there between steps 1 and 2. Very cool. I like that a lot. And diffuser strakes even. Maybe a little difficult to see. Watch the strakes there in the bottom of the diffuser. Go to 0 and they go away. Very nice there. Alignment, camber toe on all 4 corners. Drivetrain, here's our diff. I'm going to want to ratchet that back on the preload there on the coast setting. Generic, brake bias, brake power, and the power steering. Dampers, look at all of those damper adjustments. Fast and slow, inbound and rebound. Main suspension settings, wheel rates, ride heights, anti-roll bars. Suspensions travel, there's the heave spring. Nice. And we don't have any fancy pit stop options there. Cool. That's what we've got on board. Let's reset to default. 30 liters of fuel on board. Complete default settings on the Aero there. Angle of attack change on the front wing. Yes, look at that. And that upper element goes away between steps 2 and 3. Very cool. In the cockpit, what have we got here? Nice steering wheel. Of course, they're not going to brand anything with Cosworth branding, as you would see at the top of the wheel on the iRacing version of this car. But very good detail here. You've got lap time there in the top right, fuel level apparently in the top left, engine RPM in the center. Yep. Gears. There's first through sixth. And reverse. Nice. Push to pass. You can see 10 P2P in the bottom left. That's push to pass. 10 of those remaining. We've got 10 shots of that. That's a manual actuation there. Button on your steering wheel. Below that appears to be position on track. And then in the bottom right, it appears we have tire pressures. Remember, tire pressures will be up a little bit because the tires are technically in the warmers right now. And yes, this is Laguna Seca. Yes. Panzer F1, hello. Yeah, I very briefly saw your video there taking a look at these cars. Fantastic, I can't wait to drive it. Anyway, let's drive this stupid thing because I know that everybody's waiting for me to do that. I've got good indicators on the pedals there. First gear. And away we go. What have we got going on? Tight pit out, we're going to go a little wide. All right, let's go. Tires are a little bit cold, going to get some understeer. Well, I've done half a lap, and let's see. The first phrase coming to mind is, holy crap. We have got ourselves a car, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, we have got ourselves a car. Default setup, of course. Already spotting a couple little things I want to tweak. Yes, the differential, but as we start to get some heat in the tires, we've got positive reactions on everything. It's starting to come up the temperature nicely. And let's see, some more instrumentation coming alive on the wheel now. See below the fuel level there, that is indicating in liters, in 26 liters we've got remaining. But below that, you see perf. That is our lap time delta. We are up by 606 seconds on our previous lap. Lock up there on the front axle. What's our brake bias? 57% to the front right now. Let's ratchet that rearward a little bit. Definitely some understeer across the front. .112.567, our first lap. Yeah, got some understeer. I'm gonna have to play with the diff there. It's low speed only for the most part. And that was a little bit too sideways. And we stuffed it. Of course we stuffed it. You have to. It's a shakedown. I do have to say, I'm not quite sure how well you can hear them, but the sounds are fantastic as it's bouncing off the rev limiter there. You hear the fuel cut. You hear the backfire going through there. Any obvious bugs or anything coming through yet? Not really. Shift lights across the top of the steering wheel. They are multicolored. They're a little bit difficult to distinguish in terms of what's green, what's yellow, what's red. Not that it really matters much. Let's see, pit stop animations. What have we got going on with that? Add a little bit of gas, change the tires there to the alternate compound. All right, pit crew animations, what have we got? Nice. But yeah, so far, nice sounds from the engine, nice gear change sound effects, nice crackles on overrun. Yep, bring the brake bias rearward by just a little bit. That helped a lot. Again, all of those settings are going to be more so determined by your taste as well as your fuel level and what your tires are doing. Let's see. Understeer's helped a little bit by the softer tires. Still a little bit too much for my liking. Gonna have to play with the diff. Does get a little bit tail happy at low to medium speeds. That's a fairly accurate characteristic of this car. Again, I've driven it a lot in iRacing. They had their version of this car out obscenely early. Right at the start of the IndyCar season back in March, they had their IR18. I did a review of it back then. It's the best open-wheel car out of America in quite a long time, I have to say. I loved it over on iRacing, and I think we're going to have a similar story here. Just coming into Sector 3 here at Laguna, it's always a little bit Mickey Mouse. The car wants to hunker down into the tarmac, but the corners just aren't quite reasonable enough for you to really get on it. So the car's always in that transitional period between relying more on mechanical than it is on aerodynamic grip. Of course, this car, it is all about underbody aero. It's very much a ground effect car. It does have that underwing, as IndyCar call it. You're sucking the air from underneath the car and accelerating out the back at incredible velocity. You are dealing with that Lotus 79 ground effect solution. Of course, it does have rather large front and rear wings here for the road course spec, but it is a ground effect car. As such, you don't get your maximum downforce at low to medium speeds. You really do have to be on it for this thing to start sucking itself down onto the tarmac, but it does. And in the oval spec, I mean, at very least on iRacing and what I've observed in reality, yeah, that really does come into the equation. Of course, the cool thing about ground effect is you're using the surface area of the car that's being presented to the airstream anyway, so you may as well get some utility from it, and they're getting a lot of downforce from it without generating too much surplus drag, unlike what happens with wings. 110.774. If you want to know something depressing, that's only about 4 seconds a lap slower than I am in the McLaren MP430 over on iRacing. Let's see, medium to high speeds. All right, it starts to hunker down there in fourth gear. All right, I feel like it's starting to come to me. We hit that sausage curb there on the apex. Car bounced in the air as you would expect, but it did not murder me. So nice compliance there across the front axle. Again, horsepower here, about 730-ish horsepower here in the road course spec. For the super speedways, that's your 2 mile and above oval circuits. You're going to be running about 550 horsepower, but the really low drag component means you're still going to exceed 220 miles an hour. At Indianapolis, though, they do run the full 750-ish horsepower. They could hit 230 plus. Probably push it a bit more into that corner there. I'm still getting to grips with it. Oh, it is good. That's my verdict, having done a handful of laps. It's good. It's really good. Again, you would expect nothing less from a team like VRC. Once again, they have hit it out of the park. Back end wants to step out there. The medium speed corners. Got to claw it back. Steering feel in terms of force feedback. I can't really look at the chat right now as I'm out on track, but if any of you have asked about the force feedback, it's good. Steering is actually a bit lighter than I was expecting. It's not nearly as heavy as it is on iRacing. Then again, iRacing has a completely different tire model and all of that. This car in iRacing is very heavy steering. Here you can toss it around a little bit more, but the force feedback itself is good. I'm definitely feeling the bumps in the road, the curb effects, and in the higher speed corners feeling the aero weight of the car as well. And a wheel spin there in first gear. That does happen in these cars. Really, only complaint setup-wise thus far. And again, we're not really going for it, but differential does need to be slackened up a little bit, like to lock a little bit later. Gearbox is really peachy. Not quite as fast as a current Formula 1 gearbox, but quick enough. I mean, let's be honest, it's still many times faster than you could blink your eye. Got a fuel warning in the top left. Any lights in the car? Not that I can see. I will say, default field of view, you can't see the mirrors at all. But eye position in here does look realistic. Again, for Assetto Corsa, we've got those position indicators for your opponents, the little arrows that come up in the screen, so you'll be using them. If you're in VR, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to power oversteer in second gear, got to watch out for that. But basically, if you're in fourth gear and above, just get on the throttle and don't worry about it. We'll take to the pit lane here, and I'll actually address the chat properly. Let's see, you got a lockout on neutral. That's good. Quite nice. Quite nice, I must say. Typically at the point like this, somebody asks for an external replay, so let's give that to you quickly. Preferably not when I stuffed it. Here we go. Oh yes, we've got proper sounds on this thing. We'll take a look at the chat now. Cameron C, yes, I agree with you. This is one hell of a car. It is my favorite open-wheeler to come out of the United States in the last 20 years. And yes, to clarify any confusion, this is one of two specifications that we have. This is obviously the road course spec. The oval version is also included. JT Plays, hello. Hesitated I, hello. It does sound absolutely glorious, I must say. And having stood in the pit lane when these cars are driving by, yep, those sounds are quite accurate. Boba Fett, yes! I have officially sold something. I'm no longer a salesman. In particular, I'm no longer a car salesman, but I have sold another car. Yes, I'll put that on my resume. At this point, I should also say that I am in no way affiliated with VRC, and I am not making any money on their proceeds. I just love their products. The onboard cameras here. What have we got? Cockpit, chase cam, roll bar. Yep, this looks pretty close to what we see on television. Other cameras here. F6 camera, another roll bar view. Nose view, looking over the front right. Wing. Ah, yes, look at that. Look at the wing main plane there and the cascade elements. See the vibrations? Yes. Other cameras, cockpit view, watch the hands. Look at the detail on the back of the steering wheel, see the wiring? Nice. Over the shoulder cam. Of course, we don't have to be bothered with the absolutely hideous halo in Formula 1 that we'd get from this view. Nice. Rear wing. Backfires there on the exhaust, rear suspension detail. And back to our roll bar camera. Looks nice. Do we see any other details? Just having a look here from the outside. Diffuser, hole for the air jacks. Nice rear crash structure detail, that looks true to life. A little bit of vibration here on the rear wing as well, have a look at that. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. JT Plays 01, yes, absolutely good point. These modders, they put in a ton of time and energy into making all of these products for us, and yes, this is a pay mod, but I mean, think about it. This current exchange rate, $4.50 US. I mean, is that even coming close to compensating these guys for the amount of time that they've put in? I honestly don't think so. Obviously, they're looking at volume rather than unit cost, but still, that's a pittance to pay when you consider the amount of time that went into this. Yes, of course, Fernando Alonso, he drove this car this week at Barber Motorsports Park over in Alabama. He actually picked the best possible day to do it because it was raining in the morning and then it dried out in the afternoon. He got to experience the car in pretty much all weather conditions that IndyCar would race in, and he loved it. No times being released, but there's a rumor going around that Alonso's best lap was actually faster than pole position at Barber this year. So if that's true, IndyCar, welcome your 2019 Series champion. could just watch this thing fly around all day. It's absolutely fantastic. And yep, definitely this is quite evocative of that late 90s Jordan livery. I'll be PC here and call it the Bitten Heroes livery. Of course, all of you well know what the real sponsor was. Hesitated I. So, yes, Fernando is going to win the IndyCar Championship next year. And then will Lewis Hamilton get wise and come over to the United States? Quite honestly, I don't think so. He has found Formula One, and obviously he's been able to dominate it, and I don't really want to get into all of the political diatribes that I could get into with that, but no. I'll go out on a limb here and say that Lewis Hamilton will never compete in IndyCar. Honestly, I think he believes that IndyCar is beneath him. Adam Crane, I think it takes 3 years to win IndyCar. It's possible. Certainly it's possible. What's going to be really interesting in IndyCar, though, in the next few years is we're going to move away, maybe not necessarily from this car, but we are going to be moving away from this Aero kit, and we are going to be moving away from this engine. Right now, we have 2.2-liter twin-turbo V6s here. Again, here in this spec, generating about 750-ish horsepower. For 2020 and 2021, they're going to be rolling in a new engine. It's going to be a 2.4-liter V6. Most likely it will remain twin-turbo, but upping the displacement a little bit means that these engines will be generating not a pedestrian 750 horsepower, but they will be up to and perhaps exceeding 900 horsepower. So, for 2020, we're expecting those engines to hit the track, to be instituted formally for everybody by 2021. It might happen a little bit sooner than that. Some of those details are still in the weeds, but right now, it's slated to be introduced in 2021, a 900-plus horsepower twin-turbo V6. It's gonna be good. Let's see, what else have we got going on here? Back to the pits. I want to lower the tire pressures a bit all around. It's equal amount. And I would like to decrease that coast diff. I'm getting too much low speed understeer. So let's just slacken the diff off altogether and see what's going on. Brake bias, I'd put it back to 55% of the front. Let's see. Luke Rosella asking, who is going to be racing for Harding next year? Well, if you believe the rumors, it could well be Fernando Alonso and Patricio Award. It's Award and Herta, not that Herta, the other Herta, is going to be running that car at Sonoma next week. But if you believe the rumors, it seems like McLaren might be overtaking Harding Racing in its totality for 2019. Again, if you ask me, I think McLaren have completely dropped the ball on getting a team together by 2019 because McLaren can't seem to get out of their own way. But if those rumors are true, Harding might be McLaren next year. Let's see, what have we got? Starting to get some temperature back up. Push to pass, down the straight. Does not raise the rev limit, it just closes the wastegate down on the turbos a little bit to get you a little extra boost on the top end. Lasts for 20 seconds, I believe, and you've only got 10 of them. Yeah, having the diff slackened off a little bit has improved rear traction a little bit. It's also allowed me to play with the throttle a bit more mid-corner, as I like to do. .109.893, I believe that says. It's either a 9 or a 0. I think it's a 9. To oversteer there coming into the corner. All I can say about this thing is it is fantastic. It was worth the wait. Absolutely, it was worth the wait. And of course, before too terribly long, we will see this car at Laguna Seca. The 2019 IndyCar Series Ender is going to be here, trading places with Sonoma. Quite honestly, I'm not a big fan of Sonoma, Infineon, Sears Point, whatever the hell you want to call that place. It's had an identity crisis for about 30 years. First sector of that circuit is fantastic. The rest of it, very stop-start, very flat, very Mickey Mouse, very NASCAR-ish. Laguna Seca, definitely a much better venue. Also the big story for IndyCar 2019, Circuit of the Americas. Yes, COTA, going to be featured for the first time on the IndyCar calendar. A little bit of speculation about that right now in terms of, are they going to reconfigure the circuit for IndyCar? Are they going to be running a shorter configuration? Are they just going to be deleting a couple of corners but still run the overall layout? It's possible. There's a rumor that the FIA doesn't want one-to-one lap time comparisons with IndyCar because, well, I can understand why. Mostly because in race trim, the Formula One cars might not be all that much faster through some of the corners than the Indy cars this year and moving into 2019. Especially with the new Aero regs coming into Formula One, cars are going to lose a ton of front-end downforce. I'm expecting lap times to be 3 to 5 seconds a lap slower. So basically returning to 2016 levels of speed. So RIP F1. IndyCar, though, they're only trying to make these cars look better, sound better, and go faster. Yeah, look at that. I'm not getting wheel spin anymore in second gear coming down the hill. Differential to the rescue. Get a little bit of wheel spin there, though. All right. should have a delay on the push to pass as well. You can't just use it sequentially. And I'm on the button and it's not engaging, so there you go. You can't just keep pressing it until you exhaust it. A little bit of sympathetic oversteer on the rear axle, kind of doing the four-wheel drift thing into some of the corners. Might want to slacken off the anti-roll bar a little bit. The rear end not quite following the front end all the time. Surfboarded it a bit. There's that sympathetic oversteer. The rear axle just giving up a little bit. It's reasonably neutral, though. Yes, it is oversteer, but it's not snap oversteer, so it's controllable, but it does slow you down. Again, that's the transitional zone between relying on mechanical grip versus relying on aero grip, just at those transitional speeds before the undertray really gets that airflow attached. Push to pass remaining. It's a fantastic little car. Yes, it is. It is doing pretty much everything I want, and not too much of what I don't. .110.043, we've set a string of times in the low 110s. So there's your consistency. It's a consistency generator, confirmed. And that's how you know you're really getting to grips with it, when you're setting a whole bunch of sequential lap times in about the same time. That's when you know you have arrived at a stable platform. One thing that they do have to change here at Laguna, and I'm not quite sure how they would do it, but they do have to deal with that pit in a little bit. I don't know if they could just move the limiter line back a bit or what, extend the pit in, but that's a tight turn into the pit lane. Other than that, though, this place is absolutely fantastic. Some more replays for you, and we'll address the chat. Oh dear, I'm seeing that we've had a little bit of a kerfuffle about Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Monza, all of that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, guys, let's just enjoy this car, please. I don't want to be dealing with Formula One politics. I've really had enough of it. Just watch my disillusionment video. It completely spoils the on-track action for me so much. I mean, we're talking about an incident that happened a week ago, and you know, people are still losing their minds over it. I mean, at the end of the day, we turn on the TV for a couple of hours, we watch cars go around in circles pretty fast, and somebody wins at the end of the day, and somebody doesn't win at the end of the day, and at the long run, it really doesn't mean much. So, it's a cool spectacle, but please, can we just leave it as a spectacle? At any rate, yep, the car still looks absolutely fantastic. Is there anything else that you guys would like to see done with this car in this spec at this track? Because I do want to show you guys the oval spec. And in terms of the SF71H, so far our fastest lap is a high 109. 71H does this place in about 58 seconds, so we're about 11 seconds a lap slower than the 71H. Ramiro Escudero, yes, this car is more stable than the 2012 car. I don't know if that's because you know what, it's going to sound counterintuitive, but I think it's more stable because it has less downforce, if that makes any sense. The 2012 car, the DW12, it had a lot of topside aero, which made it unbelievable through high-speed corners. I mean, at the time, in 2013 to 2015, 2016, IndyCar actually had more downforce than Formula One. But because of that, the car is very temperamental. It was very pitch sensitive, and believe it or not, it was roll sensitive. Through low speed corners, it had absolutely nothing. It just pushed like crazy. It was an absolute pig. High speed corners, it was hooked up well. This thing, though, with moving the aero balance away from the top side and putting more emphasis on the under tray, I think it gives you a more consistent platform, I'll tell you that much. And the front and rear wings, now that you don't have the big side skirts anymore, and you don't have the multiple flap elements on the wing, I think you get more consistent flow. You get less overall downforce from the top side, but it's more predictable, and I think that makes it, at very least, feel more stable. Yes, aerodynamics talk. We could do this. You're right, Mark. You're right about there being a big problem if you lose the sealing effect on the undertray with a ground effect car, but that's assuming that you're running skirts. You'll notice they're not sealing the undertray. They're not sealing the diffuser on this car. That's banned, and that's why that's banned, because if you do have a sealed undertray, and let's say the car gets sideways and air gets underneath, then the thing turns into a parachute and it flips over. If you don't seal the undertray, yes, you lose efficiency and you lose some overall downforce according to the theoretical maximum, but you do gain a little bit of a safety margin, so that does buy you a little bit of a slip angle, which, okay, it's not necessarily what you want on a super speedway, but it does give the driver a couple extra seconds to get the thing slowed down before it would go sideways. So at very least, you lose efficiency, but you do gain a little bit more of a safety margin. If you look at a car like the Lotus 79, for example, they are sealing the undertray. They have skirts on the sides. They're sliding up and down. They're physically scraping along the tarmac as the car is going around, and that seals the undertray. In 1983, I want to say it was, when Formula One, they didn't ban ground effect. They banned skirts because they saw the potential of these cars getting airborne at high speeds, and it would not have been good, particularly in those days. So they banned skirts. They did not outright ban ground effect. That came a little bit later. Once the speed started to get really high in the turbo era, the engine builders started to play with horsepower, and the chassis manufacturers just started to play with, we have to package all of these components. Remember, these engines with two big turbochargers. Some teams were running V6s, some teams were running V8s with the turbos, so there's a lot of stuff to package. That's when you saw these cars in Formula One. That's when you saw them get really wide, particularly in the midsection. They just had to find space to put all of this stuff. So the emphasis went away from the undertray, and it just went toward figuring out how to package all that stuff. And that's really what was the death knell of ground effect in F1, and that's when they went topside aero crazy, and we're still seeing that today. Over here in the United States, back in the 80s, American open-wheel racing was almost exclusively on oval, so they were playing with ground effect all the way up to the end of the kart era, really until, 1999-ish, 2002-ish. That's when kart, as we knew it, officially died. It turned into Champ Car, and they went to spec chassis. That was ground effect as well, all the way up into those days. What IndyCar did, starting when the IRL came about in 05 or so, with the spec Dallara and Panos chassis, they didn't have much ground effect. They were mostly topside aero as well. But starting with the DW12, you started to get more of an emphasis on the undertray with the aero kits that the teams were developing. Yep, they were still very topside heavy, particularly on the road courses. But here, this is maximum downforce on this car, and it looks very simple when you compare it to what's going on in Formula One nowadays, particularly in the area of the front wing. But just like you had in the kart era, you got these big tunnels underneath the car, and you can see where they exit here out the back of the diffuser. It's not quite as substantial as what we saw in the kart days, and it's not nearly as substantial as what we saw at the end of the 70s when Lotus brought the 79 out to play. But it is there. It is ground effect. The big difference is we're not sealing the diffuser. We're not sealing the undertray. You can see what they're doing, though, with the floor, with extending the floor out well beyond the side pod. They're trying to gain more surface area for the undertray, some more surface area, not necessarily for the tunnels, because they are underneath the car proper, underneath the side pods, but they're trying to gain air, basically. They're trying to gain air volume that they can funnel into the tunnels by extending the floor a little bit. And, of course, they're also using these little, not quite sure what you'd call them, turning vanes. They're not quite turning vanes. Little flick-ups ahead of the rear wheels, what I'm talking about. They're trying to use that for some topside aero, also to control the tire wake a bit, as well as to feed the top side of the diffuser there in more of a traditional Formula One sense. So that's where they're playing with it. And yes, that's a very good point. Adam Crane there. You see these little nacoducts that are cut into the top of the floor here. That is to bleed air out from the under tray as well, particularly if the car does begin to go sideways. You know how NASCAR has the roof flaps, and they've got flaps on the front bonnet now as well as on the rear deck lid? Same effect without any moving parts with those little strakes coming down off the sides of the floor. Yeah, the problem in F1, the Aero problem anyway, there are a whole multitude of problems in Formula One. The Aero problem is not the downforce per se, it's the way in which it's being generated with vortices. Every body that moves through a fluid is going to generate a wake. And the amount of turbulence in that wake is going to determine how much drag the body is generating and how much interference is going to play with anything following closely behind. Formula One wings, what you see, and you can really see this well in wet conditions now, you'll see along the front wing end fences here, I see on the IR18 they're quite simple, but you will see vortices trailing off of the top trailing edges of the front wings, and that's generating a lot of turbulence. You'll also see in very particular conditions, we haven't really seen this year, but you'll also see those vortices start to suck back in and go into the side of the car, feeding toward the rear. And that's a really cool thing when we can see it. Again, we don't get to see it that much. Conditions just aren't right for it. But more so what you'll see in wet conditions on F1 cars and even in IndyCar to some extent, you'll see vortices coming off of the rear wing. And also coming up from the under tray, those big rooster tails that you'll see an open wheel car generate. That's all the air being funneled out the back and being shot up so that you create an equal and opposite reaction in the opposite direction. So you get downforce. What that causes, though, is it creates a partial vacuum behind the leading car, so the trailing car is always going to be losing some airflow over the front end, which is going to hurt downforce. But those vortices, when they spin off of the aero surfaces, they don't just miraculously stop. They keep spinning. And the worst part of it is, because they're a low pressure zone, and they have some rotational momentum, is they'll actually expand. If you've ever watched an aircraft, particularly a large aircraft, an airliner, landing in wet conditions or very humid conditions, you'll see vortices coming off of the wingtips, and they can persist for minutes after the plane is long gone. You get the same effect with a race car. It's a little bit difficult to see. It's also a little bit hindered by ground effect, again, because it's going to run into the ground, but those vortices will persist in still air for quite some time, which means that it's not only going to spoil the airflow for the car immediately behind, it could potentially spoil the airflow for a car several hundred meters behind. So again, more of a problem. Yes, I agree. It is more of an open wheel problem because these cars just have less surface area presented to the airflow. In a closed cockpit car, even an LMP1 car, they've got more bodywork to play with. So even if you do get into dirty air, as we're all calling it, behind another car, you still have more surface area to manipulate what's left of the flow. So they can work their way around the problem a little bit. It's inefficient, but it works. With an open wheel car, you don't have as much bodywork, and you're very dependent on wings. So if your wings are compromised in a poor flow situation, remember these wings are all designed in a wind tunnel to work with a nice uniform laminar flow of still air at standard atmospheric temperature and pressure. So if anything deviates from that baseline, you're going to lose efficiency, and that's where the problem is. And yes, wheels are the bane of Aero. I mean, yes, an open wheel car fundamentally has to have wheels that are not shrouded by any bodywork, no fenders or anything like that, as we see here for the most part. But these tires are really chunky. They're huge. They're the largest single component on the car for the most part. And they're right out there in the airstream. You see, because the front wing does extend ever so slightly beyond the track of the front axle, they are partially shielded, but you've got that big wake of the wheel trailing behind the car. That's creating a ton of drag. It's also, because the wheel is spinning, you're also getting, what is that effect? When a cylindrical body spins in a fluid, it's the Magnus effect. Yeah, you get that. So you also get a rotational force imparted into the car as well. If you really want to get anal about it, you can get into gyroscopic precession, but that's not really a factor here. Maybe a little bit on ovals, actually. But again, it's basically just a big drag generator. Why do you see LMP1 cars with the wheel shrouded? Well, because they don't want the drag. CFD work on 2018 and 2019 F1 car. Huh. That would be quite interesting to see. I don't know if you've got anything up on your YouTube channel, Mark, but yeah, that would be very cool to see. I'd be all over that. And let's see. Yona, your point about six-wheelers. Yes, that is a partial solution, but the P34 was not really concerned about wake turbulence. We're basically talking about wake turbulence here, basically in the same vein as aircraft are concerned about wake turbulence. What the P34 was doing was much more rudimentary. They were trying to reduce the car's frontal area, meaning they're trying to, you see how the front end of this car is raked quite substantially. It goes up in this wedge shape toward the cockpit. That's a lot of surface area presented to the airstream. What the P34 was trying to do was they were trying to keep the car as low as possible for as long as possible. And the whole car is basically just a brick. And the bodywork that you see around the driver, that's just bodywork. That's not a part of the car structure at all. So I would hate to see what would happen if you had a big accident in a P34. But the small front wheels, that was designed to keep them out of the airstream entirely. And of course you get the snowplow front wing, I guess you could call it. It's not really a wing. Not a very aerodynamic shape at all, but they were trying to just cut down on the amount of surface area presented to the onrushing air with that. I guess a side effect would be you're not going to generate too much turbulence with it, but then again, you've also got a big rear wing on that car, so there's your problem again. I'd also hate to see figures for balance, aero balance on that car, because I'd imagine most of the downforce is actually over the rear axle, which would make it quite skatey at high speeds. But then again, with all of that rubber on the road, maybe you could counteract it with mechanical grip. And yes, the BT46B, the fan car, that's pure ground effect again, and that also hindered on sealing the under tray. They had skirts as well on that car. They weren't quite as intricate as the sliding skirts that we would see on the Lotus 49, but they basically had a hovercraft in reverse. You know, a hovercraft that'll have a rubber skirt around the bottom of the chassis. They're pushing air through the under tray from top to bottom. They're blowing it through to create a cushion of air underneath the vehicle that it then floats on. What the BT46B was doing was that same effect, but in reverse. They are pulling the air out of the underside of the chassis versus blowing air in, therefore creating a download effect, negative pressure underneath the car. A six-wheeled fan car would be absolutely brilliant. I would love to see one of those, even if it is just a design study. But yeah, actually, one other thing that I would like to see, using some retro and new tech, Lotus 49. Passive ground effect, completely dependent on the car's forward speed through the air. But remember what Renault did on the, what was that, the R30 in 2011 with the front exhaust, the exhaust exiting at the front surface of the floor, and they were trying to blow the floor that way to create a rudimentary ground effect with exhaust pressure. What if you just routed the exhausts forward on the Lotus 79 and had them exit in the front section of the tunnels in the under tray? That was a mostly sheet aluminum car, so temperature not so much of a problem there as it would be on a carbon monocoque. I think it could be done. Might be interesting. Gozy McRae, Formula One is just outright banned ground effect in terms of sealing the under tray. They can sort of get around it aerodynamically. They can create boundary layers, dynamic boundary layers now in some sections with all of these vortices, and they can sort of seal the under tray that way in a virtual sense. But IndyCar does run ground effect. Let's see, I think it's time to go into the oval spec of this. Let's go to South Star, and we'll boot up the oval spec of this. It is set up as a different car. It's not just a matter of zeroing the wings out on this spec and then you have the oval spec. It's a completely different car. It's got a completely different gear set. I have not driven the oval version of this at all, so that'll be a true first-time shakedown. Let's boot up to South Star in the oval spec, and we'll see you there in a moment. The stream is going to cut out momentarily, but I will be right back right here, so please stay tuned for that. Welcome back. Again, we're just going to wait for some positive talk back here. And it looks like we are up and running once again. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody in the interim there. But we are now at South Star. This is the oval track. It is based on Texas Motor Speedway. VRC also included this in the Formula North America pack. Looks like we also have 2 tire compounds available here on the oval spec of the car. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's just take a look at some of the differences here. You'll notice the chassis more or less is exactly the same as it is in the road course spec, but the big difference is, look at the front and rear wings. They are teeny tiny now. You don't have those upper flap elements anymore as we had on the road spec. Now you just have this single main plane wing. And the rear wing as well, single main plane. It's more of a spoiler than a wing. It's not really generating much in the way of downforce. It's more so a spoiler just to straighten the airflow out for basically the courtesy of the trailing car. Because you will see on the short tracks as well as on the super speedways, these cars are able to run very closely nose to tail. So again, they don't want to create those vortices and those turbulences that we do see in Formula One cars. Anyway, in the way of setup electronics, now we can adjust turbo boost pressure. We couldn't do this before, so we'll zero that out. front wing, we should still see an angle of attack change. There it is. See, the whole wing changes in its pitch from 0 to 5. Rear wing should also follow suit. And indeed it does. Very cool. Very, very cool. Diffuser strakes, we can also change those. 0 and 1. Let's just run this in the default setup. With the difference of we are going to zero out the turbo for the moment. Also, well, no, let's run it on default first. I want to add some cross-weight via tire pressures. That worked on the 1999 version, but I don't know, we'll see. Alrighty then. So we should have much longer gearing in this spec. Top speed's going to be well in excess of 200 miles an hour now. Also, look how long first gear is. Very easy to bog it down. Listen for the gap. Oh yeah, big drop off there between gears. Again, that is all expected. Look at that. Alright, turbo. Let's ratchet that up because we need the boost. There it is, 100%. Also, no push to pass available in the oval spec. Now the ratios will start to stack up closer together as we get higher up in the gearbox. There we go. And there's some understeer already. 335 clicks. 350. 360. Yeah, we're playing with some speed now. Yes, and before one of the pedantic observers notes it, yes, my force feedback is clipping, I know. Leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. Tires are coming up to temperature now. This thing is rock steady. I mean, it is absolutely 100% stable. It's not twitching around. It doesn't want to move around on the straights. It doesn't want to hunt up the racetrack in the corners. It is dead flat. It is absolutely dead flat. Steering weight, still pretty light, even though the force feedback is clipping. Starting to get a little bit of understeer starting to creep in. Still nothing that's going to make me lift. It likes this middle groove. Not a problem. If we want to force it down low, we're probably going to have to lift out a bit. Not through here. For 1 and 2, I'm going to say definitely. Let's see, let's force it down to the low side. Yep, there's the lift. But nothing too tremendous. And there's the wall. Let's see, how does it stack up to that? Did we lose anything? Or is it merely cosmetic? I'm going to say it's merely cosmetic. Maybe it even made the car a little bit better. You might say in a situation like that, well, how come the car didn't explode into 10 billion pieces and launch me into, I don't know, lunar orbit? Well, these cars actually are built to take a bit of a hit, and it's not uncommon even to see, well, the race leader tag the wall on at least one occasion during an outing here on an oval, and, well, they make it. Let's see. Let's pit in and add a little bit of gas. Repair our damages. Brakes on the oval spec, they barely work. Just keep that in mind. Repairing the last of the damage, and off we go. Now the turbo is up to 100%. Notice we haven't gotten any of the car status indicator flashing there. So you can run full boost and not worry about the engine. That's good. Very, very nice. Again, I am just absolutely amazed at how rock steady this thing is. 2012 car twitches a bit in the oval spec, not this one. Not even remotely close. And I do believe that was fastest lap of the session. Of course, lap times on an oval, they are kind of irrelevant for qualifying on the ovals. IndyCar does it by average speed, not by lap time. Of course, if you have a higher average speed, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a faster lap time, but they do it by average speed. Usually it's a 2-lap average on most super speedways. At Indianapolis, they do it out of a 4-lap average. But yeah, this is quite controllable. It's not going to be fatiguing for a long time. You can definitely do 500 miles in this. Yep, consistent. The only area that this kind of falls short, it's actually a limitation of Assetto Corsa. It doesn't allow the car to be set up asymmetrically. I mean, you can set it up asymmetrically in your settings, but it doesn't allow asymmetrical chassis proportions or suspension components, things like that. When these cars are set up for an oval, you can actually see it when they're sitting in the pits. You see that the entire car is preloaded to the left. So that as the car is sitting on level ground, it is actually rolling to the left a little bit. It's called stagger. You can see that when they're sitting in the pits. You take a look at the rear end, and you just see the angle of the tops of the rear axle, the tops of the tires there on the rear. They are canted ever so slightly over to the left, and that makes a big difference at 200 miles an hour. Assetto Corsa does not allow you to do that. Aside from that, though, yeah, VRC, they're working around that limitation, and it works quite nicely. Downshift protection. First gear is very, very tall. Again, another lockout there on neutral. So you can't accidentally go into neutral, that's good. Again, very, very nice. Again, it is the same overall car, just trimmed out to do a completely different job. External replays coming at ya. Take a look at the chat once again. Sim Racer Flight Sim 1000. Hi there. Mark Thompson, yes, I agree with you. I was also thinking these cars would be very twitchy on ovals, but it's exactly the opposite. Again, I think that's ground effect. The old Monza circuit, this car would do it. If the 1999 car can do it, this one can definitely do it. Again, this is all VRC, the track and the car. Zelda AC Fan 17, I have joined you in waiting for this car for quite a long time. As soon as IndyCar unveiled the IR18, in reality, I fell in love with the thing, and we got it in iRacing some months ago, loved it there, and now we finally have it in Assetto Corsa, and so far, I'm loving it here. I think back there was where I tagged the wall. On board, there we go. Oh, yep, I think we've got some front wing flex here as well. Let's confirm it. Yep, there we go, some vibration there. A little bit more difficult to see with the smaller wing, but it is there. A little bit of wobble there on the rear wing as well, a little bit harder to see. Back to this view. Yep. There's that wobble on the rear. Again, it's kind of subtle, but it is there. Very cool. And no, we've not smacked the wall yet. And yes, the sounds here, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Their main sound man, Mr. Mike, I think he's the Mr. Mike you hear on the sounds for the MP420 and on the Williams FW37. And I think like a couple other cars as well. These sounds are created by Mr. Mike and are only to be used on the VRC insert car here. That's him. He's on Twitter, Mr. I Mike. Great guy to talk to. Very opinionated about Formula One affairs as well. Had a little bit of a disagreement with him yesterday regarding engine regs in Formula One, but he is the ultimate VRC sound man, and he's done a great job again. Zelda AC Fan 17, yes! And if you are a fan of Porsche, I did a video some months back about the Porsche 911. You might want to take a look at that. Cozy McRae, we were just talking about engine regulations. I want bigger engines. I want engines that rev higher. He was coming from the point of view of manufacturers. If they're developing turbo technology, if they're developing hybrid technology, why not have those regulations in Formula One? I get where he's coming from, but I'm not watching Formula One to watch car companies experiment with things. I'm watching Formula One to see something that's going to keep me up at night with how fantastically epic it is. So I see where he's coming from. Mr. Zelda fan, sir, yes. The IR-18 is a fantastic car, and if you ever get the chance to go to an IndyCar event, you will not be disappointed by how these cars look, sound, behave, and smell in reality. They are truly a sight to behold. One of the things that always stands out to me is when you go to an IndyCar race, I'm guessing this is more prevalent on an oval just because of the relatively tight confines of everything versus a road course, which can be larger, longer, more elongated. But when the race is over, you can smell the fuel in the air. It's something that's quite striking, and it's completely not something that you would ever suspect just watching these things on television. Mr. Zelda, sir, that the sounds being similar is because it's the same engine. It's the same 2.2-liter twin-turbo V6 that we've carried over from 2012. So the engines really haven't changed, so the sounds are going to be similar. In reality, I've seen both the DW12 and the IR-18 in person. They sound pretty much identical. Again, same engines, you'd expect that. For 2020, 2021, IndyCar is going to be moving to a slightly larger engine. These are 2.2-liter V6s. In 2021, we're going to get 2.4-liter V6s, so they might sound somewhat different. They're probably going to be revving to about the same red line, so 12,000 RPM, give or take. So they'll sound similar, perhaps a little bit throatier with the higher displacement, but I'd expect IndyCar to sound like this for quite some time to come. other thing that's interesting in terms of sound, and you really can't get a sense of it here, but when you are at a race and you see these guys going by at speed, you can hear not only obviously the sound of the engines and the gearbox, but you can also hear how the air is rushing over the car. It's it sounds like an airplane going past, for want of a better comparison, but you hear the air being displaced by the cars as well, and that's also an interesting sound. Sim Racer Flight Sim 1000. Yes, this is definitely a return of the kart-esque era, I guess we can say. It's not quite what kart used to be, but coming up to above 900 horsepower in IndyCar, as is slated to happen for 2021, we're getting back in the territory that we had in the kart days, and that's something that a lot of people miss. And it's something that I think now that we have some better technology, particularly in terms of safety, I think it's something that we can reasonably do once again. The kart era, I think it was just a little bit ahead of its time in terms of the performance of the cars versus the ability to keep the drivers safe. I mean, 1999, I think it was, Greg Moore at what was then Fontana, now called Auto Club Speedway, out in California. That big accident, not even a snowball's chance on a frigid day in hell did he have of getting out of that car in one piece. But look at what happened just a couple of weeks ago at Pocono with Robert Wickens. Not at all the same type of accident as Greg Moore, but up in the air, into the catch fence. Robert Wickens, no, he's not in great shape right now, but he's still with us. He's able to talk to us, and he is going to make a recovery. It is still a little bit uncertain in terms of what kind of recovery he'll be able to make, but he is still in one piece. He's pretty well banged up, but he's still with us, and that is, honestly, there's no better testament to how far safety in open-wheel oval racing, how far safety has come in the 20 years since Greg Moore and Robert Wickens. Mark Thompson, with the catch fencing. Yes, something does need to be done with the catch fence. IndyCar have praised the catch fence in the wake of the Wickens incident because it did its job. The catch fence, its only job is to keep the car on the racetrack, within the confines of the racetrack. From that standpoint, the catch fence did exactly what it's supposed to do. But the knock-on effect of the catch fencing doing exactly what it's supposed to do means that it completely destroyed that chassis, and it was likely a very big contributing factor into the injuries that Robert Wickens suffered. If you want to get more extreme about it, look at the IndyCar World Series in 2011 at Las Vegas. Dan Weldon getting into the catch fence. Fortunately, one of the fence posts made it into the cockpit, and we know what happened there. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know about the feasibility of anything like this, but my solution would be, and we can actually take a look at this if we go into free cam. You see how the barrier is? And perhaps along start-finish is not the best way to look at this. Perhaps through one of the corners a little bit better of an idea. But you see here we have the barrier. It's a steel barrier, and they haven't really modeled it that well here, but this is a multi-layer steel barrier with foam inserts, crushable foam inserts, designed to absorb impact energy. It's done a great job, particularly in NASCAR, with reducing the amount of force that is going to be transmitted to the driver in the event that he gets into the wall. It's also done a great job in making sure that the cars don't deflect as much as they come off of the wall after hitting it. But at the same time, the wall can only do so much, and that's when you get up into the catch fencing. It looks pretty much like this in reality. You just have basically a chain link fence reinforced with some basically rebar here, some braided steel cable similar to what you'd see on suspension bridges and lifting rigs. And then it's all supported with just typical fence posts, as you can see. What happened with Dan Weldon and what happened with Robert Wickens evidently was, as the car got up into the fence, it hit these fence posts. And these are just steel. This is steel tubing, obviously bent to fit the shape of the fence, but these are exposed, and the cars can run into these, and we've seen them run into these. What I would do, as a stopgap measure at very least, is raise the height of the barrier. The actual barrier, not the fencing. Raise the barrier a bit so the car has a little bit more altitude that it can reach before it's going to get up into the fencing, and I think that would mitigate probably 80% of the accidents that we see involving catch fencing. Beyond that, let's put these fence posts behind the fence, and let's move them back a bit. Let's move them back behind the wall itself rather than mounting them to the wall. And why don't we stay the meshwork with more steel cables? It'll add some more flexibility into the fencing, which might not be the best for spectator areas, but it's going to reduce the chance of a car actually hitting the fence posts, which really are what do the damage. The chain link and the steel cables here, they deflect quite a lot. Yes, they will do some incidental damage to the suspension components and things like that. You're never going to keep a car in one piece if it gets up into the fencing, but move the fence posts back. That's what does the damage. Aside from that, raise the height of the barrier a bit. Same material, same safer barrier as NASCAR calls it. Do that. I don't know if that's the ultimate solution, but it's a solution. Sim Racing 604, hello! Very nice of you to join us here this evening. I'm not sure if you've driven it yet, but yep, Formula NA 2018 is here, and if you haven't driven it, Mike, you must drive it right now. Stop what you're doing, stop listening to me ramble on about nothing, and go drive this car and review it in much better fashion than I certainly will. Mike, as it is with any VRC car, totally worth it. Don't worry about it. It was, with the exchange rate, it was 450 US for me. Probably be slightly more Canadian, but it's not going to break your bank at all. It's brilliant. Everything about it is perfect. 100%. It's ready to go. Yep, just like the 1999 car and the 2012 car, we've got an oval spec and a road spec. There are a couple of default setups that come with it. I haven't loaded them in yet, but they're there. And obviously, this is the oval spec you're seeing now. The road spec's got the bigger wings and the shorter ratios as well in a gearbox, so it runs very nicely. We've taken a look at the road spec already. If you want to rewind a little bit, it's brilliant. Alright, seeing some requests here to run this at Monza 66. Are there any objections to that proposal? Monza 66. Can I get a motion to proceed? I'm seeing a motion to succeed. Can I get a second on Monza 66? There it is. Alright, Monza 66. Let's do that. And we'll go to Modern Monza after that. Again, the stream is probably... Do it, you New Jersey scumbag. Well, okay, I typically don't respond well to criticism like that, but I like you, Iona. So, therefore, Monza 66, we'll do Modern Monza after that. Monza 66. Again, the stream is going to cut out momentarily. Please stay with me. We will be back in just a moment. Alright, I do believe that we are back. Again, just waiting for a positive talkback on my receiving end, just to make sure that we're there. Yep, there we are. Beautiful. Booted up to Monza 66. This is the full road course with the banking. If this doesn't kill the car, I think it is well and truly ready to go. I'm so optimistic that I'm going to raise the final drive ratio and 6th gear as well. I'm even more optimistic that I'm going to zero out the Aero. Yeah. No topside downforce at all ground effect. Alright, well, if we don't survive this, I want all of you to know that you were all very much appreciated. This whole crazy endeavor of Ferrariman601, in some way it was worth it, and we're dying already, and we don't keep it out of the barrier. Yes, RIP in peace. I'm dead. Okay, maybe we need a little bit of downforce. Okay, default setup. Let's just raise the final drive ratio back to 407 at max speed. Okay, a little bit of downforce this time. Okay, the car gets very squirrely over the big bumps. We've made it through the first corner, okay. Bouncing off the rev limiter as the car is getting airborne momentarily. It is squirrely. I said this thing was rock steady at South Star. Well, it's not so rock steady over the banking here. Those bumps are huge. You can't use the full length of 6th gear at all. Brakes. Yeah, that's full brakes. Not even a very remote chance of locking them up there at high speed. 2nd gear. When was the last time you saw an open-wheeled car take the Lesmos in 2nd gear? Nowadays, this is the Ascari chicane. Understeer city, as you might expect. Again, in the oval spec, it is not designed to go slow. Wowzers. The bumps are definitely worse in the first banked corner for some reason. Now you might be saying, why don't you go down in the flat bit? Problem with that is, it has so little downforce in this trim that it won't make it around the flat bit. So you have to use the banking. So effectively, as the ratios are now, it's a 5-speed gearbox. That's well and good. Could, of course, shorten them out to get into 6th gear. We locked them up. There's the barrier. Great. And of course, once you get into the barrier, you can't get out of it again. And my steering is well and truly... yeah. Well, that happened. That wasn't that fun. Alright. Let's lower the final drive ratio a bit. 370 should do it. And I think we actually, well, I might regret this decision, but if we lower the tire pressures actually a lot, let's not be silly here. The problem is, I'm in the oval setup, and we have the really hard tires, and we have high tire pressure in this spec, which is not at all what you want on the road course. Problem is, if you run the road spec here, you're going to have no straight line speed. So you're in this limbo of you have exactly what you want on the banking, but you have none of what you want on the road course. Go. We'll be able to use 6th gear now. Barely. Now the name of the game on the banking is try to hold the steering as steady as you possibly can. Problem is, the bumps are huge, so it's the wheel's constantly trying to rip itself out of your hands. But you don't want too much deflection to happen in the steering angle, because as the car comes back onto the ground, if you've got steering angle dialed in, the front axle is going to grip, and that's going to send you off into oblivion. So yeah, keep the thing in the direction you want to go, regardless of where the car is going at any given instant. Probably didn't have to lift there. Braking way early. Look at the understeer though. Again, really hard tires, really high tire pressures, and no downforce. On. Okay. It's really just that one set of bumps. Also, you notice around the banking there, you see those towers on the outside of the circuit. Not sure I would have liked to be sitting there. You know, obviously, when this track was in use in this configuration, the speeds were lower than this, but they were still going at a pretty good clip. If somebody did manage to get into the air and run into one of those towers, I wouldn't even want to consider the consequences. But you are in the firing line up there. Fifth gear, don't lift. Yes, perfect, it's stuck. Brakes. Yes, I'm still chickening out. I know I could have braked a few hundred meters later. Just that first set of bumps in there completely gets the thing unsettled. If you're ready for it, you can get through it. If it takes you by surprise, see you later. Trying to treat the yellow line like a barrier. Alright, good. And a reasonable lap time, 1:55.453. Brakes, fifth gear. Car does stick at high speed, that's good. But it does not at all stick at low speeds. Basically, as far as we're concerned here, the thing has no grip at all if you're in any gear that's lower than fourth. That was more of a reasonable braking point. You'll see it's pushed us a little wide, but that's okay. That was wheel spin. Oh, that is insane. I don't even want to know what the G-force would be. If you were to try and do this, what sorts of G's, not only laterally but vertically, what would the drivers be subjected to? Momentarily over those bumps, maybe 10 G? Something ridiculous like that? And again, that would be vertical G. So if you're not absolutely bolted into the cockpit, I'd imagine you'd be bouncing around in there. I'd venture to say if you managed to do a lap around the banking in this thing without breaking any bones, that would be a feat in and of itself. Yeah, that's crazy. That's absolutely insane. No way would you want to attempt this. But yeah, that's what happens. Let's address the chat again. yeah, there was absolutely no chance of of doing anything respectable here. Just look at how that's moving around. Do you see that deflection? That's entirely ridiculous. I do appreciate the Fs to pay respects. Yes. It does look pretty dramatic. I'll give it that. Man, there is no rear wing at all on this thing, is there? Just look at that. Mr. Zelda Man, sir, a 6th gear was just barely long enough. I did not hit the limiter at the end of the straight. It was hitting the limiter over the bumps on the banking, but that was only because of the bumps. It was just barely long enough. Eric Dunlap, yes, this is the best-looking race car ever made. Well, I'm not sure I want to say ever made. It's definitely the best-looking car in the last... let's think about this. F2004, that looked pretty cool. MP420, that looked pretty cool. But, okay, I'll give you the last 15 years. Yes, the best-looking car ever made, for the most part. Yeah, that was quite a bit of excitement. Yeah. Modern Monza, yep, that's coming up next. We'll use the road spec Aero kit for that. Best looking car in the last 15 years is obviously the HRT F111. No, it's not. Especially in the livery that they ran. You could be here in big block letters on the side pod. No. Okay, modern Monza in the road spec of this car. That's coming up next. So we won't have quite as ridiculous speeds. And in terms of questions about liveries, obviously I'm running the stock VRC liveries that come with the car. I'm sure that some skin modders are already hard at work making some real-world liveries for this. So that will be coming, I'm sure. Probably some Marlboro tribute schemes for old-school Penske. I'm sure somebody will be making that as well. They're currently not available to the fullest extent of my knowledge, but they will be there. Craig Bevan, the best looking car ever made was the 2014 Caterham. changed my mind. Craig, unless you happen to be visually impaired, pretty sure that was sarcasm. All right, modern Monza with the road car, the road course Aero kit on it. Coming up next, again, the stream will cut out momentarily. Stand by, we will be back. And we have returned, and by Iona's special request, there is the Danica livery, as close as we can get to it right now. Danica Patrick, of course, she did her last race this year at the Indy 500. She crashed out, and I will leave my commentary there. But yes, this is the Danica livery. Anyway, same car, road course spec now. Take some fuel out. Let's trim it out a little bit. Nothing too spectacular. Slacking off the diff, as we found out at Laguna Seca. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Okie dokes. Alright, modern Monza, you can see this part of the circuit is completely unchanged for the most part. Slightly better tarmac now, only slightly better. I think we're going to need longer gears. Just a suspicion. Well, so far, I'm pleasantly surprised. It doesn't have the high-speed aero of a Formula 1 car, but mechanical grip kind of overrides it. It's good. Let's see, do we bounce off the limiter at the end of the straight? I think we just might, especially if we hit the push to pass. We do not, interestingly enough. Again, if we hit the push to pass, we definitely will. You know, not bad. Not bad at all. Let's see, SF71H crosses the line right now. We've still got a ways to go. And the lap time is 1:33.018. Here comes the rev limiter. There it is. slightly longer gears. Just a longer 6 will do it. Okay, so we knew this going into it. It's missing the all-out top end, and it's missing the high-speed cornering grip that you'd get in a Formula 1 car. But in terms of driving the thing, a modern F1 car, it's on rails. You turn the wheel, it does exactly what you expect it to do. It's always going to be ridiculously fast no matter what. This thing, you've actually got to drive it. It will try to skate away from you through the high-speed corners. It will try to lock the wheels up under braking. It will get twitchy over the curves. It makes you drive the car rather than merely guide it. I like that. Does have decent compliance over the curbing. Not bad. Not bad at all. Let's lengthen 6th. But I like, overall, I like a lot. Let's, let's throw up some replays. That was quite tail-happy under acceleration. Again, I will take that all day long. Again, the external sounds here, they have done a fantastic job. Coming into these big braking zones, turning into these corners, it does look pretty racy. Yeah, some interesting fun facts about Monza. Of course, you go anywhere in Europe and it has at least 1,000 years of history behind it. Another interesting fact about Monza is the configuration of the circuit is such largely because of the rules about the place where the circuit happens to be. It is in what is now a public park, used to be a royal hunting ground for Italian nobility, but they're not allowed to cut trees down here, so whenever it comes time to address the gravel traps or they try to figure out a different configuration for this place, the local city council always stops them because they don't want to cut trees down. So Monza is what it is, and it's probably going to remain that way forever. Situaciones Vida Real. Yes, that was the video I put up a couple of weeks ago with the new spec of the MP420 at Catalunya, just basically to let you hear the new sounds that they put externally on that car. Brilliant. Yes, the new Honda NSX, unfortunately, if Honda wanted to sell them, they would have made what they originally made back in the early 90s. That was the NSX. Nothing needed to be changed about it. They went and changed the entire car, and now, yeah, the performance figures are pretty impressive considering the price point, but unfortunately, you've lost all of the passion. Also, nice rear light detail there coming on when you enter pit lane. Just noticed that. Spot on, perfect. Alright, we said that we were going to lengthen 6th gear a little bit. I need 1 click. Like that. That will take care of it. Just 1 click. And I'm liking this setup so much that I'm going to save it just as a baseline, but it works. Works very, very nicely. Let's see. Alright, and just so we don't cause any controversies here, I'm not going to cross the white line until it ceases. I'm going to go around all of the chicanes very deliberately. And I'm going to park my car right here so Lewis Hamilton doesn't get any ideas. I'm liking this. I'm definitely liking this. I have no complaints. My only criticism is the shift lights. They're all apparently white until the last two, they light up red. As far as I'm aware, and again, this could be team or driver specific, but it should be a progression of either white or green, and then yellow, and then red. Or blue. Very, very minor thing. It doesn't even really matter. That's the only thing that I would change. That's it. Okay, that was a little bit too much throttle. We held it and then we didn't, and there's the, yeah. That happens. Yeah, that happens from time to time. I will say, though, this is a car that you have to drive. It just doesn't do its own thing and you're merely along for the ride. Nope, you've got to be on top of this every second of the way. If Fallout speed is what you're after, well, nothing's gonna even come close to competing with, well, let's be honest, the Porsche 919 Evo. Formula 1 cars are, you know, barely faster than that thing. But if you want to see driver skill, if you want to see what happens when you really have to wrestle a race car, try the IndyCar series. They don't have power steering. They don't have power brakes. They've got a lot less downforce than a modern F1 car. A little bit down on power, but it's a showcase of driver talent, and it's a diverse series. Ovals, permanent road courses, temporary street circuits. They do all of it. And of course, to reiterate from the beginning, they're going to COTA next year. And they're going to Laguna Seca next year. And I heard, I couldn't verify this anywhere else, but I saw a news story last week saying that they were considering, just very, very in the beginning stages of considering, a race in Argentina for 2020. So if IndyCar could re-establish an international presence, they used to have this. They used to have a race in Mexico. They do have their race in Toronto, Canada, but not since the days of kart has American open-wheel racing gone to Europe. Perhaps in the future we could see a race at Brands Hatch, or perhaps at Lausitz in Germany. Maybe even at the Nürburgring, who knows? The long and short of it is, IndyCar is definitely on an upswing. and they've done it by returning to their roots. They have revived a lot of what was going on in the kart and champ car days. In those days, it was quite comparable to what was going on in F1. The technology was similar, the speeds were down a bit, but horsepower was there. Technology was mostly there. Of course, Nigel Mansell coming over to the United States in 1993, where he was simultaneously the IndyCar and Formula One world champion for a little while. Fernando Alonso looks to be set to do something similar next year. I think it is a good time to race in America. First gear, not quite your answer through there. Yeah, you can push the braking a bit. It responds nicely. And that's a 131.833, I think. And we are out of push-to-pass power. And when you really push the braking hard into the corner, you get a very nice rotation of the back end, leading you to the apex. It's nice when the back end does step out under those conditions. It's sympathetic. It doesn't try to kill you. You get the inverted pendulum effect, but it's not too harsh. It actually helps you turn the car. Lost a tenth of a second down the straight, though, because we don't have push to pass anymore. So that's what it's worth. And, yep, lock it down. Okay. I'm going to pit on this lap anyway. Again, you've got to go for it. That's how you learn what a car can do. You find the limit and then you just go past it, and, well, as you might expect, when you exceed the limit, it's a razor edge. It just goes away. Again, slick tires, racing tires, very restrictive in terms of the slip angles you can get. The steering wheel's vibrating all over the place now because of the flat spots. But it doesn't matter. That is what you do. Even in the real world, the one time that I drove an actual race car, I did just that. You approach the limit, you find the limit, and then you just take one step over it, and it's gone in the blink of an eye. That's what you gotta do if you're gonna learn how to do things. Let's address the chat. Zelda AC Fan 17. When will the MP420 R25 and the 90s V10s reach 1.0? Those are the VRC cars, of course. I don't know. I don't have any time frame for VRC in terms of what they're working on, but this is the quality that they're capable of producing. This car, they announced it many months ago. Today, it's finally here. Maybe it took a little bit longer than some of us would have liked, but if this is what they're capable of delivering, I say let them take as long as they want. Yona, you're talking about linguistics. I will bite. Enzo Ferrari's surname means that his family must have arrived to Modena from the nearby area of Ferrara, near or in northern Romagna. Yes, that makes sense. I would assume that whenever his family made it to that area, they were still speaking more of a Vulgate Latin rather than something that looks more like modern standard Italian, because Ferrara, obviously a nominative, it's a name of a place, but Ferrari would be the genitive, the possessive, so something of Ferrara, you would say Ferrari, perhaps. So, that's probably an interesting theory. As far as the inevitable talk of IndyCar versus Formula One, I think it is entirely possible that IndyCar could become more popular than Formula One. Ultimately, time will tell, but the biggest problem that IndyCar has right now is exposure. It's popular in the United States. It's still behind NASCAR in terms of popularity, but it is on an upswing. NASCAR is in big trouble. The CEO of NASCAR just went to jail because he was caught driving drunk and in possession of illegal substances. And if you're in the position of power over a racing series, the last thing you want on your public persona is driving while intoxicated. So NASCAR is in big trouble. The championship-winning team last year in NASCAR, Furniture Row Racing, is closing at the end of the season. They can't find sponsors, so the reigning NASCAR champion is actually going out of business. That's a big problem. Could you imagine what would happen to Formula One if Ferrari went out of business tomorrow? That would be it. NASCAR is in that position right now. As far as IndyCar, they need more international exposure and they need more international events. But I think they're going to try to do it. Obviously, they go to Toronto now. I mentioned they're in preliminary talks with Argentina, the regional government there in Buenos Aires. They are working on putting a race together for the next couple of years. We'll see if that happens. We'll see if they make it over to Europe. They did in the kart days. Maybe they'll do it again. And certainly Alonso will help. And yes, Adam Crane, yes. Bill France did not go to jail. He has far too much money to go to jail. He was, however, arrested for a DUI charge. At this point, I think IndyCar could afford to put more races into the schedule. Next weekend at Sonoma is the last race of the season. That puts us in mid-September. Formula One doesn't finish their season until the end of November, and sometimes the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is even held in early December. So IndyCar could probably afford to extend their season a bit. I think the start of the year is pretty good, going to St. Pete, and then next year they're going to go to Coda after that. But I don't see why they couldn't keep racing into October at very least. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, Formula One, they went to Suzuka traditionally at the end of the year, and that was usually in the middle of October. So I don't see why IndyCar couldn't do an 18-race calendar, something like that. It would be sufficient. There are more tracks in America that they could visit. They could go back to Watkins Glen. They could go to Sebring. They do have a preseason test at Sebring usually, so I don't see why Sebring couldn't host a race. I also don't really see why Daytona couldn't host an IndyCar race. I mean, they do ovals all the time. They do super speedways. The biggest ones that they go to are Indianapolis, obviously, and Pocono. So Daytona, that should be right up their alley. I don't see why they couldn't do either the road course or the oval at Daytona. Beyond that, you know, why not visit Indianapolis again during the course of the year? Yeah, that would probably take some of the allure away from the 500, but it's available. So I think there are definitely ways that they could extend the season for sure. Ayrton wants IndyCar at Imola. Does anybody else want IndyCar at Imola? I mean, that's a good point about Sebring being bumpy, but Belle Isle looks pretty bumpy to me, and they seem to manage. Formula One at Long Beach would be cool if they ran the actual Long Beach course. You know, if Formula One went there, they would take away everything. They'd take away the corner that goes by the fountain. They would turn everything into long straights and 90-degree hairpins, and it would be a snooze fest. It would basically be like Singapore in California. Lewis Hamilton under pressure for the title. Honestly, all Lewis needs to do is finish 5th in every race that remains, and he'll still be the world champion at this rate. If Mercedes continues to get waivers from the FIA to do all sorts of unsporting stuff like, you know, crashing into Ferrari, and if Bottas is still allowed to be a moving chicane and block anybody behind him, Hamilton's the world champion, no question. Yes, last year's IndyCar season ender with 5 drivers theoretically in it, and then of course Joseph Newgarden taking the title at the end. Yep, that's pressure. 5 guys for the title. That hasn't happened in Formula One since 2010, when you had Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber. They were all definitely in it. Lewis Hamilton, I think, was still theoretically in it at that point, and one other driver might have been in it as well. Was Massa somehow a long shot? I don't quite remember. Yes, Button was that fifth player, theoretically, for the 2010 world title. Charles Leclerc at Ferrari, obviously that is something that needs to happen, and something that probably will happen, but at this point, if I were running Ferrari, I would think it's a toss-up in terms of who Leclerc should replace. Kimi Raikkonen's been doing a great job this year, all things considered, and I think Sebastian Vettel should be made to sweat a little bit for his seat. He has been at Ferrari since 2015. He's had a good car last year and this year, and he can't seem to convert anything into a consistent title challenge. I would make Sebastian sweat for the seat. Damon Hill coming back to Formula One? No. No. Hill's been out of the picture for far too long, and yeah, I think he's liking the checks from his associated broadcasters, to be quite honest. Mika Hakkinen almost came back for 2007. He did that test at the end of 06, but he just didn't like the car. It wasn't working out. What I think would be cool in terms of teams running third cars, let them run a third car, but have the third seat be open. Don't run the third car every weekend. If you have, let's say you have a reserve driver and you want to get him a couple of races, just put him in the third car, and it doesn't really matter what he does. Just put him out there. If he scores points for you, so be it. If not, so be it. Also, maybe that third car at Mercedes could be reserved for Nico Rosberg, maybe, or maybe for somebody like Jenson Button, or maybe even for somebody like Mika Hakkinen. You know, it could be cool if you do have teams running a third car that could be a wild card. Maybe you could have former world champions do a race every now and again. It might be cool. I mean, think of it this way. If Ferrari were allowed to run a third car, you know, past 2006 or so, maybe Michael Schumacher would have been there. Maybe he still would have been there. I mean, you know, we could speculate until the cows come home, but I don't know. If Michael Schumacher had a Ferrari with his name on it, ready to go for a race weekend whenever he wanted, perhaps he doesn't go skiing. You never really know. Christian, I wouldn't make the third car mandatory. Run it if you want. Perhaps do something where the third car doesn't score constructors' points or something like that, just so you don't have the top teams absolutely running away with the World Championship. McLaren's lineup for 2019 with Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. I predict McLaren folding in the near future. And honestly, the way McLaren has treated Stoffel Van Dorn through all of this, absolute, just, ugh. They had the nerve to go out to the press and say that Toro Rosso should sign Van Dorn. Wow, what an endorsement from your former employer. Here's our driver who we were singing the praises of merely 12 months ago, and now we're saying he should go drive for a backmarker team. That's incredible. Also hearing some rumblings, again, all unconfirmed, but Kubica might actually be coming back for Williams. I don't know if Lance Stroll is going to be driving for Stroll Team Canada at the next race, but it's possible. John, Alex Zanardi actually has tested a Formula One car in somewhat recent memory. He was an unofficial test driver for BMW as recently as '07, I think. So he has driven a modern F1 car. They could obviously do all sorts of adaptations for him, similar to what they're doing now for Billy Monger. And he's managed to be competitive in DTM. He actually doesn't use his prosthetic legs for the DTM car. He has all hand controls. He's got a throttle on the steering wheel. He has an actual lever for the brakes. He's got shift paddles on the steering wheel as well, just on one side, upshift and downshift. So they could adapt the DTM car. Obviously, they've got more room in the cockpit to do things like that, but he has driven a modern Formula One car in his current condition. I don't know how he was braking, but I know he had the throttle and gears on the steering wheel. And he was all right. He could probably do it. Stonehenge asking opinions on Assetto Corsa Competizione. Well, I obviously, just like all of you most likely, haven't driven it yet, haven't even really seen it yet in terms of in-depth stuff. So it's a big unknown at this point. It is going to be coming out in early access pretty soon, so we'll see what that yields, but it'll be okay, I think. As long as the physics are comparable to what we have here in proper Assetto Corsa, it should be a hit. The only problems I see, the subject matter, how many people really want to be driving in the Blancpain GT series? That's question number one. And question number two is, it's not going to be moddable. So that's going to take away a big piece of the potential ACC audience. It does mean good news for Assetto Corsa, because it's going to remain relevant for the foreseeable future. Obviously here, with this mod, it's proving that it's a stable platform for development, and it's proving that it can remain current with different content, so that's good. I'm hoping that ACC is more of a field beta test for Assetto Corsa 2, if and when that should ever arise, but I'm not happy with the subject matter. I'm not happy with the fact that it's not really going to be moddable, but we'll see. I do have high hopes for the physics. Let's see. Let's take this thing to Imola, and then we'll close out from there. Again, the stream is going to cut out momentarily. I will be back. Yes, and we are back at Imola with a new livery. This is Will Power's livery, not quite, but yes, you can see Horizon is sponsoring this one. Horizon, obviously, Verizon, yeah. But, anyway, let's actually, this might seem a little counterintuitive, let's load up the Monza setup. I liked that. We'll shorten the final drive a little bit. We'll give it a little bit more wing. And then it should be good to go for Imola. That's how adaptable and how intuitive the IR18 really is, and that's why the teams like it, and that's why they can keep the costs down in IndyCar. You know, random thought here. Why don't IndyCar go to Imola? Considering Formula One keeps saying, oh yeah, they have the Grade 1 certification, they could host a Grand Prix, yet they'll never go back. So IndyCar, why don't you go to Imola? And absolutely, okay, keep it clean here, Ferrari man, absolutely one-up the storied history of Formula One going on hallowed ground. Do it. I mean, think about it. 2021, 2022, 900 plus horsepower, non-hybrid cars pounding around Imola. That would be cool to see. Make it happen, please and thank you, IndyCar. How about that? This is the Monza setup, basically. All I've done was shorten the gear ratios a little bit and added some wing. And it's perfect for Imola. That's how adaptable this car is. Push to pass just underneath the rev limiter there. It's perfect, straight out of the box. VRC, they have given us a car that's reasonably easy to drive, provided you have an idea of its overall characteristics and what it likes and what it doesn't like. It's really easy to set up, and it seems to be infinitely adaptable. It's fantastic. And with some strategic use of the push to pass, there we go. Best lap of the session, 127.965 or 985. And again, you've got to go for it. Stay away from the inside curb. It's par for the course anywhere, in any car. We are really going for it now. I'm overheating the rear tires a bit. Yep. I always just barely tag the wall in those situations. It's annoying. Well, now I've really overheated the rear tires. That's okay. Yep. But it does demonstrate that these cars are very good at doing donuts, unless your name is Alexander Rossi. Rear tire pressures have gone up to 27 psi. That's how hot they are. You can see the effect of that now. That is the mark of greatness. It does everything you want it to do. Some little things that you don't want it to do, but that's only because you pushed it too hard. It's perfect. In every conceivable way, it is perfect. I can find no fault with it. Yes, the next Formula One race is Singapore. In other words, they should really call it Sing a Snore, because it's going to be Lewis Hamilton on pole by about 17 years, and then he's going to win the race by about 17 centuries, and then Sonoma, well, for the IndyCar finale, that might be more interesting. Let's face it, Scott Dixon is going to win the championship. Yes, I know Rossi technically is in the pound seat for it, but Scott Dixon, he got so lucky in Portland. I can't just... He was off at the first corner, or the second corner if you want to be technical. Imagine, he drove into a cloud of dirt. He managed not to hit anybody. The only damage to his car was a little scuff mark on the nose. That was it. He manages to salvage a whole bunch of points and still be in contention for the championship. If Scott Dixon doesn't win the championship this time, I think he might have been running out of luck. Yes, of course, I am planning on doing a commentary stream for Singapore when that does come around. The ultimate verdict on this car, though, VRC, they have once again done it. I mean, everything they touch turns to gold. Sometimes they take a little while to bring us new content or to update what's currently out there, but they really have done a job. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than this. The quality that you get at the price point, it's... I mean, honestly, if they wanted to market this as, I mean, it is payware, but if they wanted to market this as full-on payware and charge $59.99 for it, I'm sure they would get some complaints, but people would still buy it. It's that good. It is of that quality. But I paid $450 US for this. It's worth a lot more than that. I mean, honestly, I spend... What do I spend? I spend roughly 3 times that for my lunch every day at work. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. For the price of a drink, you can get this, and it's absolutely brilliant. honestly, I cannot find a fault in this thing. A couple little tweaks here and there that I would just make on a matter of personal taste, but nope, no complaints at all. Just tagging the wall there. Yep. RIP rear tires. More RIP rear tires. Will say though, just look at how skatey it does get when the rear tires overheat, so keep that in mind. Tire temperatures are pretty critical on this. Keep that in line, and I think it will only yield fantastic measures of enjoyment. Absolutely brilliant. That's my verdict on this. It's great. It's absolutely great. Absolutely on par with everything else that VRC have been giving us lately, and really throughout their entire history. I'm trying to think when I first saw them, what my first interface with them was. Was it the... It might have been the Williams? The FW37, maybe? That was the first car that I ever saw from them. I can't quite remember, but they are brilliant. They have done a whole bunch of open wheelers now. Obviously, the Formula North America pack with the 99 car, the 2012 car, and now this one. We've got Williams FW37, the FW19 Williams, the F310B Ferrari, MP420 McLaren, R25 Renault, the Jordan 191, I mean, the MP44. The MP44, that was the first VRC car that I ever saw, but regardless of all that, yeah, they're brilliant. They're absolutely fantastic. All of their mods that are 1.0 spec and above are free, except for the Formula North America pack, which of course includes the 3 cars plus South Star Speedway. They are also going to be adding a second track to this pack. I don't know what that track is. I don't know if it's going to be another oval or if it's going to be a road course or a street circuit. I just don't know, but I do know that they're working on adding a second track to this pack. Regardless of what they do, it's going to be brilliant. It's always brilliant. These guys don't seem to know how to make a mistake. Everything that they release is just perfect. Remember the MP422 when that came out last year, and that thing was perfect out of the box as far as I was concerned, but nope. They continued to work on that. They updated it into 0.2 and 0.3 spec, and now at 1.0, it's even more perfect than perfect was at version 0.1. Most modding teams stop with their first and only release, but nope, not these guys. It's fantastic from the ground up, 100%. Took them a while to give us this one to complete the Formula North America pack, but it was definitely worth the wait. It really does not get any better than what these guys at VRC are able to give us. With that, though, I do have to call it quits on this live stream. It is approaching midnight here on the West Coast of the United States. I do, of course, thank you all very much for joining me here on this, wow, quite long extravaganza up to this point. But definitely, thank you all for joining me, and the long and short of this, the message is go buy the Formula North America pack from VRC. VRCmoddingteam.net is where you can find these guys. You will not be sorry. If you have Assetto Corsa, you need VRC's cars to complete it. It's that good. Anyway, thank you all very much for joining me. Ferrariman601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.